that we're going to be having this conversation with Natasha and Stephanie. So a little bit about myself. I was a classroom teacher a few years back. I taught kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, and also did my student teaching in a preschool classroom. All my teaching were in Virginia. And I loved being an elementary school teacher, and I'm still in touch with many of my students who are now adults. And in all of my experiences, so let me back up a little bit. I grew up in Ghana, and all my teachers were Black growing up until I moved to the US when I was 16. In high school. And in the last 2 years of my high school years, most of my teachers were not Black. But I did have a couple of Black teachers in my high school in Virginia that were amazing and had huge influences in who I am today. I am a mother of 3 boys, and I know that in your schooling experiences, I have wished and hope they too will have Black teachers, because there is something special about having someone who looks like you, who can validate what you're feeling, even in a very young age. And also something very important in all children, seeing particularly Black teachers in the classroom and seeing that Black women and Black men and, teachers who identify as Black or as people of color can be in a profession, can be in a role where they're helping children learn how to do things academically, but also learn how to interact with each other in terms of social skills. And so with that, I'm going to stop here because I think Natasha and Stephanie have a lot to share with us. And I hope that in our gathering today, we can use this opportunity to ask questions. But I'm also hoping that the experiences that Natasha and Stephanie are going to share are going to help us in our thinking about what it means to be a teacher. So without further any more conversation from me, I want to introduce Natasha and Stephanie. Natasha, you can start first. Maybe you can share a little bit about yourself, and then we'll move it to Stephanie, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, thank you. Yes, my name is Natasha. Like I said, I recently got married and still adjusting to my new last name. So my maiden name is Woodson, but my new married name is Woodson Bell. But I let the students call me either. I told my grandmother, I said, as long as they're respectful, I don't mind. And I actually, do you keep going or just introduce myself that way?
If you can tell us a little bit about your workplace, your student teaching, where you're teaching now, the grade, the subject.
Okay.
Well, yes, that will be.
Okay, I can do that. Mm-hmm. Okay. So coincidentally, I work at Colton High School, and I did my student teaching there as well. I actually started my student teaching during the pandemic, so during distance learning. So about 2 years ago, and I actually did my student teaching during distance learning, and I was lucky enough, was able to get hired at the school I student taught at as well. And so I stood out to the principal kind of thing. And then, so I've been, as an official teacher, this is my 2nd year. And so I've taught Algebra 1, 9th grade. And last year, I also taught Algebra 1 support as well. And like I say, I'm passionate about social justice math because I want students to see that you can use math as a tool rather than just as something that you have to take as a graduation requirement, but I want them to see that math is everywhere. And I'll say the CSUF credential program has a great representation. Yeah, sorry, reputation. That's what I was trying. I'm not saying the right word, but I'll come back to that. But also I say it prepares you very well for the profession because not a lot of schools actually make you take both semesters of student teaching. And also CSUF also encourages or requires us to student teaching throughout the whole school year to end until the school year. So rather than when your program is finished, you need to keep, it encourages us to keep going. So, because I've seen other student teachers here to where when their program is finished, they just stop then. But, you know, sometimes students are like, okay, well, where do you go? Or where'd you go? So that's something I think is still rewarding to at least see how the semester ends. Also, some of the rewards are, you know, I like to inspire, influence, and encourage the next generation. You know, sometimes students will ask for advice. Sometimes I'll give academic advice, or I'll give, you know, personal advice if they ask. If not, you know, sometimes I think students just need to have a soundboard too sometimes. So I try to be there and listen to them, because sometimes they don't have that outlet. And I'll say some challenges. I was trying to figure out earlier, how do I make the challenges sound beneficial? But some challenges I noticed, you know, throughout the program was time management, because during distance learning, we had, I think, like block schedule classes, but then also I still had to do my credential work. So, but I'm still struggling with time management in itself, but I think it's getting better a little bit. And yes, I'll say last year, classroom management was a big hurdle, but it's better this year, but you know, it's still a work in progress. And yeah, similar procedures and routines were something that I had to tackle as well, because I didn't get that experience during distance learning. So that was something I had to, like I say, tackle. And I think I was able to get the hang of it a little bit. You know, still, like I say, a work in progress with that. And I say my advice is to find a mentor and or teacher friend and or teacher friends to ask for advice and to vent. The venting part is very important sometimes. I would say also go to teacher conferences if possible. Continue to be a lifelong learner. And this is something I discovered, like I still was struggling with, is learn how to be yourself respectfully, I'll say. For instance, I like to demonstrate my culture sometimes, like during Black History Month, or even other times I'll wear like African like suits, not suits, but like something that has African colors. Be like I have like a blazer or pants, or like last time when we had to wear masks, my mask would be like African colors. Or like during Black History Month, I encouraged them. I tried to get the Hidden Figures movie to be displayed on campus. So
thank you so much. Thank you for giving us, telling us a little bit about yourself, but also giving us a little bit of an overview of what your experiences have been. And we're going to have time to dig a little bit deeper in the next we have a couple of hours. So I'm really excited, Natasha, to dig a little bit deeper into your experiences. So Stephanie, will give you the floor to introduce yourself, and then we'll come back to the questions and dig a little bit deeper.
I don't think the other student has joined us, Doctor.
Okay. Well, so then Natasha, you and I are gonna talk through this together. And then I'll share some of my experience too, sis, too. And then we can go back and forth that way until Stephanie joins us. So Natasha, you've touched on this a little bit more, but can you tell us a little bit about why you expand a little bit more on why you decided to enroll in the CSUF credential program? And I'll tell a little bit about my experiences too.
Well, I will say, so I actually got my Bachelor's of Arts through Fresno State in, let's say, like 2014. And so I decided to go back to school. But in between going back to school, I actually was an instructional assistant. So I was a one-on-one aide for autistic students. And then also I was a math tutor for continuation high school students. And so those experiences actually inspired me to want to go into teaching, because actually I had those experiences. Then I decided went back to school, and I thought I wanted to get a master's in stats. And I took a course and I was like, okay, this is not it. So I reflected back on some of my experiences, and so that's what made me want to go into teaching. And so I was, like I said, I went back to school at Fullerton. And so that's when I was like, oh, and I've heard like good things about the credential program. And so I'm glad I decided to go into that program as well. So experiences led me to it, I'll say.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And for folks who are not familiar with our program, I put the link in the chat. So I work in the elementary and bilingual ed department, and we offer the multiple subjects credential. We also offer a combined credential / master's degree program. And this is my second year, and in my experiences with the students that we have, I know that I have enjoyed serving as their instructor, professor, and I really have enjoyed working with them as well. These are some very passionate people. And what's really interesting, Natasha, as you were talking, is folks apply or decide to become teachers for many different reasons, right? I know I chose to become a teacher when I first started college. I wanted to become a medical doctor. And after taking chemistry, I quickly learned that path was not for me. But I did, I thought I wanted to become a medical doctor, but what I really wanted to do was to work with children. I thought I wanted to be a pediatrician, but it was really working with children. So I had the chance of volunteering as an undergrad in an elementary classroom, and I loved my time in there. And so I went to school in Virginia, University of Virginia. So at the time, there was an early childhood / elementary program that they had. And it was a little different from our program, but in this program, I guess it's sort of similar to the combined masters, because you could get your bachelor's and your master's after the 5th year. And I loved being in it. And I see some of the same love in the students that we have at CSUF. Some folks know from a very young age that they want to become teachers. Some folks are like me. They know they want to work with children, but they don't know quite yet. And some folks have had other jobs like bank tellers or I don't know, like a personal trainer or some any type of job, and something, led them into becoming teachers. And so I say all of this to say that people come to teaching from many different backgrounds, but once they become students, they form a cohort. And that's something that I've loved about the CSUF approach. And you've mentioned a little bit about that too, Natasha, is the students in the cohort take care of each other, right? They have this bond of we're in this together, we're working through this together. And I have loved when I've observed students, when you're student teaching, the kind of communication that they have with your peers to support each other. So that's a little bit about the CSUF program and the credential program. So Natasha, we're going to move on to the next question and jump in a little bit. I know you've touched on this, but what are the rewards from choosing to become a P-12 teacher in your own experiences? And as we talk, if there are folks here who are currently practicing teachers, please feel free to chime in as well.
I just want to give a special shout out to Dr. Waller. I say, if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't be able to get into the credential program. So, I just want to give a special shout out.
Yeah.
So some rewards, like I said, to inspire, influence, and encourage. And I will say that aha moment with students is what I love. I'll say, especially, so say if you're on a certain lesson and then you go back to like, say, a certain assessment or a certain other lesson that's like a few ones. So say if you're on like lesson 2 and then they go to like, we're doing lesson 5 or 8, and then they see something that reminds them of lesson 2, then you're like, oh, like what you just did. I'm like, yeah. So that to make those connections, or for them to see those aha moments is what I love, to see that light bulb is amazing at times. And then, yeah, so those are some rewards. I love the aha moments. And then like I have some students that I had from last year that still will come up and speak to me. Like even when I come in to walking across campus to my classroom, like a lot of students will speak and things to that effect too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I still keep those connections.
Yes, absolutely. Natasha, thank you for sharing that. And as you were talking, it made me think about the last grade that I taught. So I was the last 3 years of my teaching, I was a kindergarten teacher. And, you know, when you mentioned the aha moment and making connections, from what I remember from kindergarten, many of the students came in knowing, some of them knew their letters, some of them did not even know what letters are. Some of them came in on a second, third grade reading level. And you have this mixed group of students with very different performances at that age. And these are, some of them came into kindergarten at 5. Sometimes they were, you know, 4, but turning 5 within the next few weeks. But one of the things that I really loved was January. Something special happened in January where all of a sudden, all these students who were non-readers began to read. And all along, you know, you're pushing a lot of like phonemic awareness and phonics and supporting them in your reading development and doing all these things. And there's just that special moment where like, oh my goodness, this person is reading and that person is reading. And the pride that you see on your faces stays with you, you know. And so those were some of, you know, it feels like a cliche when sometimes people say, well, I want to be a teacher because I want to make a difference, right? And you see that difference happening right in front of you. See those children reading, and you see their peers cheering each other on. You know, those are the special moments and the rewards that I think becoming a teacher makes it all worth it, because there's definitely a lot of challenges as well. So let's see if there are any folks here who are teachers or who have worked with children who want to share some of the rewards that they've seen in their own practice. All right, we're practicing our little wait time. So if did I hear someone come off the mic?
Oh, is it okay if I just speak out?
Yes, please.
Oh, okay. Well, from my experience, I'm an instructional assistant for
Yes.
English learners,
Uh-huh.
and this is for high school.
Yes.
It's a credit recovery school. So one of my most recent rewarding experiences that I have had is yesterday. I got to speak to a student who was not doing well in any of her classes. She was not doing any of her assignments at all. Like the only thing you would see, it would be zeros for every class. And so that really shocked me. You know, I was really surprised by because this is like a young lady that I will see her drawing, very creative. She had shared with me her creations in what she's able to do with art, including like animation, and it's like it will blow you away about how artistic she is, right? And so I had no idea that that was her situation, you know, that she wasn't doing anything in any of her classes. And so when I questioned her, what was the reason, you know, like what can we do to help her, you know, get her assignments done? And she opened up and she said that she had no support from her parents. They wouldn't see art, you know, as a career field. And so she had no motivation, and that's why she wasn't doing anything.
Hmm.
And so the teacher and myself spoke to her and told her that she needed to work towards her dreams. She was soon to become an adult, and not to let anything stop her from, you know, becoming what she wants to be in her career goal. And so, you know, she got a little emotional because she had lost trust in counselors and other people who she had opened up, because she wanted this to be kept secret about the support about her parents.
Mhm.
And so after speaking to her and telling her that, you know, we were not there to judge her and we want her to achieve her goal, she started doing her work. And so that to me was really rewarding. And I asked her if she didn't mind that I spoke to the career center, so they can tell her about career options that she can take, and also like financial aid. And she said she didn't mind. So like today, the next day, I went ahead and spoke to the career center. They said they would talk to her the next day, so they can inform her about her choices, her options. And like right now, she seems like more motivated and excited, and she's doing like her assignments. And so to me, that's rewarding. When you can make a difference like that from someone not doing anything because they don't have the support at home, and maybe they lost trust in some counselors, because they weren't able to keep the information confidential. So for me personally, that's been very rewarding. I
Hmm.
wanted to share that right now.
Hmm. Thank you so much for sharing that. And these stories or sometimes I feel like it's what keeps us going when things get hard as teachers. And we know sometimes there are challenges, and we're going to get to that. But I want to give the floor to Stephanie. She was able to join us. Stephanie, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, telling us a little bit about who you are, where you teach, what you teach, but also tell us a little bit about why you chose to be in the CSUF credential program.
Hi, everybody. Sorry I'm a little late. I currently am no longer in the classroom, but I taught I did 15 years in special education in Santa Ana, California. I was an early childhood teacher, so birth to 5. That's definitely my sweet spot. Love it. I do miss it. I left the classroom in June of 2020, but I actually still work in public education. So I work for the California Teacher Association now. So I do more of the union side when it comes to bargaining contracts, negotiations, grievances, anything related to a contract. I'm assigned to 4 different school districts, and I work for CTA. I definitely miss the classroom. I kind of have baby fever right now because I miss the babies, but my oldest is 17. I think I'm done. So I'm gonna just be okay with that. But I actually chose Fullerton's program because I initially wanted to go far from home. I thought I was gonna leave Orange County. And then I just was too nervous. And so I did my undergrad there. And I was actually offered an intern position back, that was like 2005, 6, where they did the emergency credentials, which I feel like we're living through another wave of that now. But I ended up loving the program. I never thought I'd be a special education teacher. I wanted to teach gen ed kinder. And then the only place that would hire me for more than like minimum wage at 18 was a school district who needed aides. And so that's how I got into special education. And I ended up loving it. I had no idea what autism was. I had no idea this whole world existed. So I didn't have any experience in it. But once I started doing it, every day was different. It was fun. It was new, and they're tiny, and you saw so much progress in a short amount of time. And other friends had gone through the early childhood program at Fullerton, and they loved it. And it wasn't like the curriculum that was always brought up. It was always like their professors. They really felt like they could talk to their professors. There was like a personable approach. It was very welcoming. And so for me, I was like, undergrad was a good experience at Fullerton. I guess I'll do the credential program. And I always felt like if I ever had a question, like professors knew my name, there was things I could share if I was having a challenge in a class or I wasn't sure about things. I just always felt like there was a genuine care for students that I think a lot of folks don't get to experience when they go to school, that you're kind of just another number, another student. And I never felt that at Fullerton. So that's why I chose to go there. And I ended up getting my master's in special education there as well. Great program. And became a master teacher. And so then I would have, as I started, becoming better in my craft, having student teachers come through, and they all continue to always say what a great experience they had at Fullerton. But it was just those relationships. And I think specifically for being a biracial person, half Black, half Latina, I really went into public education thinking I'd see folks like me somewhere. I was in Santa Ana, didn't happen. And so my principal ended up being really intentional about hiring folks from Fullerton and building that relationship, but specifically BIPOC folks that were going to come in and look like the student demographic. And to me, that was huge. I didn't see that. My first year I taught in Los Alamitos, which is where I live. So I was the only BIPOC on the whole campus, right? And so I was treated differently. I was young. That made it even worse. But once I started seeing like a lot of BIPOC folks don't go into education because they say we don't make enough money. But that's not true. It just depends on where you work. right? And I think the message needs to really be that between the pension and the benefits you get and the number of days you work, public education is a great place to be. There's so many positions. There's district positions, school positions. There's all kinds of things that folks can do now, especially with all the money going into the funding. It's not easy, right? And everywhere you go, you're not always valued. But I will say it's rewarding in a way that you don't get from, I'd say like a typical 9 to 5. And, the relationships I've built with students and families, just for me, that's just been priceless.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. It's great to hear your perspective and your experiences as well. So one of the next questions that we were going to get to was around some challenges that you have experienced as a teacher, and you touched on it very slightly. And so Natasha and Stephanie, if you can share a little bit more about some of the challenges that you've had to, endure, and what have you done to improve things?
Okay. I was like, Natasha, you could go first because I just talked.
Okay, I'll go. Yeah, because I think you mentioned challenges. So I will agree with you about the only one type thing. I know I knew I was going to be the only one in math, I'll say, but there's not even that many Black teachers on my campus as well, I'll say. So this year I have a few more Black students than last year. And it's funny because I'm like, oh, did you? So one time I told one of my students, I was like, oh, well, did you tell your parents about your teachers? And one was like, yeah, I did. And I'm like, well, what did they say? He was like, oh, that's good. But then I will say a challenge that I feel like I got scarred last year, I'll say. Some of the students use the N-word with the ER as a joke. And so I noticed that, because I noticed it in my classroom, and even when we have sub shortage in my district. And so I'd have to period coverage. Like say, sometimes I'll choose PE. A lot of teachers don't do that. But I've noticed, like, even if I would sub for a PE class, like I've heard even some students still use that as a joke as well too. And I'm like, why? It's interesting to me. I feel like it's contradictory to where they promote diversity, equity, respect, but yet I don't feel like it's addressed on the other hand. But that's been one challenge that I feel like I've still been scarred by that one. But yeah, there's different challenges, like, because I said my experience is unique because I went from having my student teaching online and did during distance learning to being in the classroom. So it's kind of like I kind of got jumped into like, oh yeah, you should be good, having your own classroom, but you got to figure out how to do it in front of students now. And I'm like, okay, that was interesting to say the least. And the group of students are interesting. They're better this year, but yeah. So those are some of the challenges I experienced as far as student interaction.
So, I think one of the biggest challenges initially in teaching is that, number one, nobody tells you when you first start, like, graduate college in 4 years, get your credential, you're like 24, and you go on a campus and you're the baby on campus. Oh, you can't see my little air quotes. And ageism is real. Okay. It is absolutely one of the things credential programs do not do enough, in my opinion, to tell you about, because you're already nervous, right? That's normal. It's a new job. These are young, impressionable brains, and these are parents that you have to deal with. But I really think that you have to not take it personal. You know what you come to the table with, right? And you're very secure in what you've learned. And look, you're all going to go and you're going to have bad days. You're going to have days you're like, oh my gosh, why did I do this? But you have to remember why you decided to come into education. And as long as you can reflect on the why and understand that you cannot control what people think or say about you, you will be fine. But you got to find your teacher besties. You really have to find the people who you can call when you're ready to cry, when you're angry, when you're like, I'm going to lose my job, so I'm going to go off on this principal. You have to have those people, because it's going to happen, right? And when you're by yourself and isolated, it's very easy to say, this isn't for me. but it's not that it's not for you. You just haven't found the right support group, right? And that might be teachers in other districts. Some of my closest friends I went to Fullerton with, none of us teach in the same district, or none of us taught in the same district. But I will encourage you to reach out. Once you become a teacher, you become a union member by choice. And if that's the path you choose, CTA has some really great opportunities for you to build camaraderie with other educators. And they have really great conferences that you can get grants for. CTA.org if you're interested. There's grants available now for the next, they have new educator conferences that are coming up for 1 to 5 year teachers. And my closest friends today, even though I work for the union, not in the classroom, are my folks that I've met in the association, because they have different groups, such as like an African-American caucus, they have a Latino caucus, they have caucuses with folks that look like you, have backgrounds like you, can relate to you. And honestly, that is really important as you start to experience not just ageism, but racism in classrooms, right? And so the reality is those things are gonna happen. My first day teaching, I was 22, and I was on a veteran campus in a district I graduated high school from. And a mom came to my door. I was a K-1 sped teacher. She was Latina, came to the door. I opened the door. I said, hi. And she said, you can't be my son's teacher. And I was like, I am the teacher. And she said, nope, you can't be the teacher. And she took her child, who was a kindergartner with autism, and walked into the office. I was then called to go to the office, and we had to have a meeting. And my principal, bless her heart, older white woman, knew exactly what the problem was. And so she just kept asking the parent, like, why can't you, haven't even been in the room? You don't have anything to say. And so I said, can you give me 30 days? Give me 30 days, we'll have an IEP and let's see what happens. Guess who was my best mom donator ever? That mom. But I had to prove myself. And I think that's something that like our white counterparts don't have to do. It's assume that they are good at teaching. It's assume they can communicate well. And we have to prove we can communicate and that we can teach these children. And so again, why you need a teacher group, because if you don't have people you can go to who are going to reassure you in your times of doubt, because it will happen, you're going to struggle, right? And you know, first year teacher pay may not be the biggest incentive for you to stay, right? And so I just really think you have to find your circle and understand that it's a great place to be. The kids aren't the problem most of the time. It's everybody else that you have to deal with.
Thank you, Natasha and Stephanie, for sharing some of these harsh realities that teachers, Black teachers face. And, you know, as you were talking, I was like, yep, it's happened to me too. Stephanie, about you can't be the teacher. I can't tell you how many times parents, family members, or students will walk in and walk right past me and go straight to my white teaching assistant and think they were the teacher. And, you know, it tears you down. But one of the things that you said that I think is so important is finding your people who you can talk to. You couldn't have said that any better, because I think those are the people that will lift you up and allow you to talk and just get it all out, you know. And I think you also mentioned some of the supports that are around to get you going, because sometimes it's more than just a friend that you can talk to. Sometimes some of these things are persistent, you know. So Natasha, hearing students use the N-word, or hearing students report other kids using the N-word, is completely unacceptable. You know, even if you didn't hear it, you know exactly what that word means, right? And you know what it means for another kid to be called that, to experience that. And I think finding ways in which, like this, and sometimes you can report these to the administrators and nothing is done, but there are, and Stephanie is sharing some links in the chat I see, there are people, there are support, and I'm not too familiar with the California system yet, but I know that in Virginia, there were groups that are dedicated to supporting teachers of color. So I think that these are things that we really need to pay attention to, and we really need to have an outlet, because these things are unique to the experiences of Black teachers. And there aren't a lot to begin with. In almost all the schools that I taught, I was either the only Black teacher or there was one more person, or I was the Black teacher and the custodians were all Black. And so it's really important for us to be in those spaces, like I was saying early on, because students need to see us in that position. But in so many ways, you will be a trailblazer in that space. And that's a hard place to be, especially when you're young, like you shared, Stephanie. That is a very real thing. So intersectionality plays out in so many different ways when you're young, Black, and a woman. And in some cases, if, in my case, English wasn't my home language. And so that's a whole other level of discrimination that you face because of that. So thank you for sharing all of that. We're going to sort of move into one of our final questions, which talks about advice. What advice do you have for folks who are thinking about becoming teachers, who are thinking about applying to the credential program? What would you say to them? Because we do know that we need teachers. We need a lot of Black teachers. So even though we have some of these challenges, we still need to pull people into the profession. So what would you say to folks who are thinking about becoming teachers and maybe not quite sure yet?
Oh, I think my first thing that comes to mind is you have job security right now. My biggest struggle every day as the union director for 4 districts right now is not only do we have a sub shortage, I got people retiring who we didn't think would retire right now. COVID has really stressed folks out. And declining enrollment as students are going over to charter schools. We're also looking at, certain districts, they're going to have to downsize at some point, but they need early childhood teachers, they need special ed teachers and math and science teachers. Those are like the golden position. So anybody's interested in that, definitely look into that. And as you look at positions, to be mindful and aware that you are the one applying in those districts, right? They don't come looking for us. And so when you go in with that lens that you're there to serve the community, you take the good with the bad, right? And so you have to really be aware. If you decide, I decided to work in a low-income district intentionally because I wanted there to be an opportunity for students to see someone who could look like them, right? And I felt like there was a connection with the community. And so I've dealt with, racism from my white colleagues, but I've also had to deal with colorism, right? And so to say, like, my name is Stephanie Thayes, okay? My kids are very, very light-skinned, look more Latinx than I do. And so it was always like, oh, are you their mom, or do you watch them? Like, who are those are my kids on the wall. Why would I have random kids on the wall, right? And so just really being aware that I think, because I see in the group, although we absolutely need Black teachers, I think there's a responsibility for Latinos to get into education, but to really start discussing colorism, especially at middle school and high school, because there's not enough of that. So although even in Santa Ana, we had a lot of Latinx teachers, at the end of the day, there weren't important conversations happening, right? And so everything is not in a book. The curriculum, the teacher guide you get, that's not what you need to do every single day, all day. There are other life lessons that we as educators need to really start talking about in the classroom, especially once you start having your own kids, right? And so, kids say all the things they want at school and we kind of have to help guide them. But I think as educators, you're more than just a teacher. I mean, you really are. I've had parents come to me and say, can we have the milk at the end of the week? Because I don't have money to buy milk for the weekend, right? Like, there's so many things you become. And you don't realize, how many times you go to somebody's house. Be willing to do those things because parents need to see you truly care and that you're invested in the community you decided to work with. And think of your retirement. I wish somebody would have told me at 22. I will tell you, when you go into teaching, you have a pension, but that pension only gives you 50 to 60% when you retire of your final salary, right? And so get a 403B. Please invest in yourselves, especially as BIPOC folks. We don't talk about long-term survival when we want to retire at 55 and not stay in the job till we're 70, because that's the second largest thing I'm having to deal with are teachers who are 75 and need to retire because they're physically, you're older. It's different. And they can't because they can't afford to retire because nobody talked about financial planning when they started. So please think of your future and figure out what kind of retirement plan you can add besides your pension.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. Natasha.
I would say do your research. Because what I did before I got interested in the credential program, I went to I forgot what the area was, but I went to the area where they had the list of requirements for the credential to get into the program. So that way I started asking, I will say ask questions, because if somebody doesn't know the answer, someone else does. So I say, do your research, ask questions. Those are my main two. I kind of had to jump through hoops, but like I said, that's why I gave major shout out to Dr. Waller. But like I said, don't give up also. Those are my main three.
Thank you, Natasha. So at this point, we're going to open the floor for questions that our audience members have.
So I have a question. I am sorry, Stephanie came in late, and Tasha, nice to meet you. I am actually the coordinator for the Men of Color in Education program that specifically helps Latino and Black men become teachers. In Cal State Fullerton, we have only 2% of Black students, and even smaller percentage of Black men who are interested in becoming teachers. Of the Black students who are currently in the program, one of their biggest questions that they come to me with, as maybe you two who have been in the program can answer, is they're worried about going to Fullerton's credential program, knowing the demographics of Fullerton's credential program, and knowing that they may be the only Black person in class. So none of them showed up today, but I am recording this. So do you have any advice you could give to my students?
Number one, please, I'll send you my email and I would love to come talk to them in person. That's number one. Anytime, I am all about trying to recruit BIPOC folks to come in education. So that's always available. And number two, I really think we have to really consider where folks are coming from, right? So I grew up in Virginia. I had Black teachers, I had white teachers, and I moved to California for high school, and I had none of that. Not a day did I have, well, I guess I had a Black track coach freshman year, but besides that, that was it. My Spanish teachers were all white women. That's just what it is, right? And so the reality is that there's a comfort level, I think, that folks don't have. I am surrounded by white folks all the time in the neighborhood I live, in the school I go to. So for me, I feel like it wasn't really, I didn't even notice. I was always the only Black kid, right? That's just what it was. But I think there needs to be conversations at high school when we talk about how we recruit folks just to get into undergrad, right? And then once folks are in, what kind of support group can we really create with people who've experienced it, right? I have a ton of Black educator friends, and in my mind, like, oh, there's Black teachers, but I realize like none of us have taught in the same districts. None of us are anywhere near each other in California. So no, there really aren't. So again, I mean, I think working with local district associations would be great too, because people self-identify when they join. And it's just a comfort thing. I don't want to say have to get over it, but they have to, because the only way you're going to survive, especially in this area, the majority of teachers are white women. You have to be comfortable. You have to figure out how to get comfortable if you're not. And so, yeah, I guess it's not super helpful, but that's what I thought of.
Yeah, I appreciate the input. Thank you.
I agree. I would say don't be afraid to stand out.
Yeah.
Because the way you stand out will actually, okay, I want to say something about stereotype threat, but that part is real. I'll say stereotype threat is real, but yeah, I would say don't be afraid to stand out. You know, I've been in, like I said, I am a math teacher, so I've been in environments where I have been the only one. But I say maybe you standing out will actually show how that whatever, maybe some people have that perceived stereotype is not true. So to me, I say don't be afraid to stand out. And don't be afraid to ask questions. You know, like say, be yourself too. That way you're fulfilling yourself, and also you'll be fulfilling towards your future, I say population of students or audience of students. So I say, don't be afraid. So yeah, I say, don't be afraid, stand out.
Thank you so much, Natasha and Stephanie.
Yeah, thank you again, Dr. Abigail and Stephanie and Natasha. Y'all have been amazing. It's been great to hear your experiences. Just a friendly reminder, I'm going to put the survey for today's panel in the chat. But But also, as Dr. Abigail mentioned, if anyone has any questions, they can reach out to me. We are recording this, so we will be having it available if anyone needs it. But yeah, just thank you again. This has been really great.